right, DJ LeRoy.
NightWatchman, a wonderful evening here in NYC, baby.
Right here in Harlem, doing it.
Lounge prime time, man.
Yep.
I'm really excited. You know why? Because literally we're going right into what is that? We're talking about Jazz Appreciation Month, man.
And the timing is good. You know, we had a show not too long ago. We were talking about jazz in Harlem. We weren't able to have our good friend Robin Bell Stevens on that show, but she agreed to come back and bring a legendary guest. So let's bring him out.
Oh, yes. Bring him out.
Okay. So
Miss Robin Bell Stevens, you know, she is the one. When you think of, let's say, Jazzmobile, there's only one name that actually comes there. And that, of course, is Robin Bell. She's been not only a good friend to the show, but also to the community, because she's made Jazzmobile visible and also providing outlets for the creative expression of artists. And she's been doing this for many, many years. And she knows that one thing that I do miss. And that was my. And I'll let you talk about it later. But that yearly trek that we used to do where to Connecticut. Yeah. But you'll yes. All right. So Robin Bell, how have you been, my dear? Good.
I've been great. Thanks so much, Curtis and Bob. So nice to see you guys this evening.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Right.
And trust me, now, NightWatchman, if you do not see this brother with a trombone, then you know what? He ain't working. He's not working. Okay. Yeah. So he says that definitely he has one that he's been using for about 56 years. And he's about to bring a new one into the fold. Oh, jealousy. But bring the one, the only, the incomparable Mr. Craig Harris.
Yes, welcome to Soul Lounge Prime Time.
Yes, indeed.
Good to see everybody. How y'all rolling? How's everybody
rolling? Good, man.
Beautiful.
Well, NightWatchman had corrected me backstage. He said, no. Robin's been here many times. And I just completely had forgotten Robin. So excuse me.
That's okay.
I need to find out Craig's journey. Okay. Yes. So Craig, welcome to Soul Lounge Prime Time. Tell us your journey in terms of jazz, music. You got it, brother.
Okay. You know, I've been on the station many times, but the first time it's just an honor to be on your show. And I talked to the Watchman about what was the name of the woman? She had the early morning Saturday show.
Oh, yes. Andia.
Daia.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, it's hard. My story is like, you know, a young person. I'm a New Yorker. I started music like around 9 years old. It was one in that great system when we had music in schools where like around 5th, 6th grade, they take you into a room and say, well, what instrument do you want to play? And in a public school system. So I chose a trumpet, but they had too many trumpet players. And the band leader and the teacher was like, all the 8th graders had graduated. So I was in 5th grade. He said, well, I got to build a band. So he said, you might like this trombone here. I said, no, I think I stick with the trumpet. Then he said, but look at your arm. He kind of used psychology. He said, all the other kids came to 7th position. He said, look, Harris. And then he got another student. He said, put your arm out. Can you identify? And so he kind of worked with, so I got to the trombone.
Wow.
It's a beautiful thing, public education, you know, you learn the basics and stuff. And then I got to around like 9th grade and, you know, playing in school. But then, you know, we were in the middle of the human rights, so-called civil rights movement at that time. And so I kind of rebelled in school. And I didn't want to be in the band in school. I didn't want to follow no rules and no regulations. I wanted to have a black jacket on and burn everything down. I didn't want to be part of the institution. So I quit the band in school and I joined the band outside of school called Little Richard and the Soul Brothers. And,
wow.
We used to do cover music. We used to learn music like we get record players for the young people. We had record players back then where you put a on a record, you play the record, and then you listen to it, and you copy the part on the record. So I started doing that, and I grew up in a place called Hempstead, Long Island.
Oh
yeah, all right.
That's where I grew up at. And at that time, like in that time, like that mid 60s to 60s, there were a lot of African Americans moving out of the city, moving in Queens and in Long Island. And so, you know, we had our band, but we would be around all these great musicians, people like a man named Selden Powell, a man named Billy Mitchell, a man named Bud Johnson, a man named Arthur Shaw, a man named Louis Armstrong. And then, you know, all these people, you know, we would see these people count, you know, like Count Basie. I saw Count Basie ever since every summer he would play in the park since I was in 5th grade. So, you know, all of this music is around me, but we had our soul. We was the funky band. We played the dances, and we played when African Americans had, like, you know, BYOBB, bring your own brown bag at the Elks Club. You know, bring your own liquor and stuff, your own setup. So I grew up like that, around the music like that, and we were doing real well. We had 3 changes. We had pink suits, green suits, red suits. And we were going to be big stars. And so we were playing, and we finished a beautiful thing at this place called Huntington House. So we tore the house down, and so we were sitting down, and then the great Billy Mitchell came up to. He said, "Man, y'all really sound good, but y'all need to learn something about some music." And we was looking at him like he was crazy. What you mean we need to learn something about some music? You know, and then he said, "Yeah, y'all need to learn some music about some music." I said, "Okay." And then what he was talking about, like, we needed to get into our educations and get back into the books and study and stuff. And so we said, okay. And then I met a man named Ken McIntyre, who was a great musician, great writer, composer, multi-readers. And he started one of the first African-American programs dealing with the music, where you dealt with the music of Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk, Mary Lou Williams, and on the academic scene, and you can get a degree for it, was at College State University of Old Westbury. They started the program there in 1972. And I went there and I studied with him. I studied with him and Warren Smith, another great percussionist. And we had there was a beautiful scene. We had a club on Long Island called Steer Inn, where all the greats would come and play. So, like, we'd study in the daytime, and we go play with people like Frank Foster. We play with people like Dave Brown. We play with like Sonny Fortune. All the great musicians, Charles Davis. All the musicians used to come out to Long Island and play at the Steer Inn weekly. And there was a guy, this guy. We play at the Steer Inn all the time, and I used to play real loud. I used to play loud, and I was like, I was into like, right now, I wanted freedom, like Archie Shepp. I wanted to get into the edge music. Like I told you, and so, but there was a guy there named Creole Pete. He was the cook in the kitchen, and a lot of the other musicians, man, they would kind of calm me down. And Creole Pete said, "Don't let them tame you," because Creole Pete came from New Orleans, so he had an idea of what brass really sounded like. And so he said, "Keep that sound." He said, "Keep that sound going." And he kind of really helped me with that. And just studying in the program at Westbury. Then there's a man named Lordine Patrick. Lordine Patrick he's also known as Pat Patrick. His son is Duval Patrick, who was the mayor of, the governor of Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, absolutely. Wow. Right.
Okay. And his father was one of the original members of Sunrise Orchestra, and he taught at the university I went to. And so Pat said, "What you going to do after you graduate?" Because I just graduated. He said, "I don't know." He said, "Come down and sit in with the band." So I went and sat in with Sunrise Orchestra at the Bottom Line, the club down on Mercer Street. And I just graduated June 4th, 1976. I graduated from college, and I went in and sat in with Sunrise Band. And he said, "Okay, do you have a passport?" I said, "No." He said, "Go get a passport." I said, "Okay." He said, "We're going to Paris next week." And so, like, I went straight from graduation, and I was on the Champs-Élysées the week later. And I was going. My original plan was to go to the University of Massachusetts to get my doctorate.
I don't know.
At this program.
Wow.
But after Sunrise said, "Let's go," and I haven't looked back then. I've just been very fortunate to play, music. And people don't know, but Sunrise base was Harlem. His manager lived on 130th Street in the St. Nicholas Project. So I started spending a lot of time uptown. And that's really, we'd come up here to get paid. We'd go to the OTB on 125th Street to get paid, because that's where he said, "Meet us at the OTB." And And then I moved uptown. My aunt had lived here. My family had lived here in the 30s before they moved out to Long Island. You know, back then from South Carolina, 1933, we brought our whole family to New York, and then they moved out to Long Island because they were doing days work like maids and grooms. But my aunt always had an apartment she had an apartment on Mount Morris Park. And then she had a friend who had an apartment on St. Nicholas Terrace. So I got my first apartment uptown for $100 a month. I remember that. 2-bedroom apartment on 128th Street and St. Nicholas Terrace, you know. And that became my base. And just working around, networking with a lot of the downtown scene with people like Sam Rivers in the Loft area. Sam Rivers, Warren Smith, Josie Wilson, a lot of musicians in that period in the mid-70s had Lost downtown. And we kept that going. And I said, why can't we do that uptown? So I hooked up with a couple of people uptown, and we started having concerts at this place called the Shadow Image. And that's what brings me into the sector here. You know, I mean, I live here. You know, I was talking to Du Bois this morning. I was walking down, and I was walking with Miles the other day. I was walking with, you know, all the great Harlemites. When I walk the streets of this community, I'm walking with the legends. I'm walking with the ancestors. So that brings us up into I guess what we can say that's how I feel really. When I see your base, Curtis, at your base at 120th, I'm going to see you on 120th and Lenox.
Very good. And as you said, Craig, the journey continues for sure. Yeah. So, Robin, I'd like to welcome you back to Soul Lounge Primetime.
Thank you.
And I want you to give me the complete overview. And I also want you to tell me about an event that you recently had in terms of Afrofuturists. I want you to give me all the details. All right? Go ahead. You got it.
Okay, well, I'm going to bounce some of those details back over to Craig, because Craig was our curator and music director for the Afrofuturism project. But I just wanted to sidestep just for a second, because I was hearing Craig talk about living out in Long Island and how a lot of the jazz musicians had left Harlem in the city and had migrated to other communities. You know, my dad played bass with Duke Ellington, and he migrated his family up to Westchester. But it was interesting because at that time, other folks were there too, like Nina Simone was there, Sidney Poitier, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee. So the areas outside of New York really became the place where a lot of these artistic people found new homes and residences, and then started their own sort of small cultural community wherever they were, because they all knew each other. So that was sort of my personal introduction into realizing that the arts was something that I wanted to find a way to make a part of my life. So by going to various recording sessions and going to rehearsals, I realized early on that I couldn't play an instrument very well, couldn't sing very well. So I figured out a way, so I started producing and presenting, and actually did my first jazz concert in the backyard of a woman by the name of Lucille Preston, who was a good friend of Louis Armstrong's. And anyways, that was my first concert. And then, you know, fast forward to where we are now. So I was at Jazz at Lincoln Center, Director of Marketing Creative Services, did the Jackie Robinson Jazz Concert for many years, which was pure pleasure and joy for me. And now here at Jazzmobile, where I keep telling people, you know, I finally know for sure that this is my purpose. And the other day, somebody said, so you ever think about retiring? I said, actually, I have recently. So my plan is to retire at the same age that George Wein retired. George Wein retired at 93. So that's my plan, because keeping this music alive and growing is just so important. And certainly it was born in New Orleans, and they will always have that, take credit for that. But it certainly did come very quickly to New York, where it was nurtured and has grown, and has then obviously grown exponentially, not only within Harlem, New York City, across the country and around the world. And Harlem can certainly consider itself a major contributor to all of that. And for all the reasons that, you know, Craig was just talking about, the great jazz musicians that were here and where we performed and all. And so now, segueing quickly to Jazzmobile.
Yes.
Founded, as I'm sure all your listeners know, we were founded in 1964 by Billy Taylor and Daphne Ornstein with Jimmy Heath. both Jimmy and Billy, of course, were National Endowment for the Art Jazz Masters. And so our programming has always been about being of the people, by the people, and for the people. And referring back to back 1964 and something that you just mentioned, you just mentioned, Craig, about the float. So fortunately, we were able, well, unfortunately, I should start with that. About 7 years ago, the float died a natural death. It was actually older than Jazzmobile because we actually rented it from a company called Bond Float out in New Jersey.
Wow.
And then we bought it ourselves. And then over time, it just fell on hard times. And as I said, it died.
So Robin, answer me this question. So you're telling me that when I used to be on 132nd Street and I would see this particular little, almost like a tractor trailer flatbed type thing coming in, that was the tractor trailer flatbed that you're talking about, huh?
Exactly. So it was pulled by a pickup truck, and the flatbed part was very New Orleans in style. If you had a white wrought iron fence and a black and white surrey on top, had had lighting, fluorescent lighting that was built into the roof of it. But it did the job. And we hired an outside audio company that would do the sound for us. So that he would follow us wherever we went. And we had storage underneath. We had drum kits under there, music stands, all kinds of things so we could present the shows literally in the community, literally bringing the music to the people. But so when I came to Jazzmobile, and then I guess a few years later, it died, as I like to say. A woman by the name of, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know this woman's name, a woman by the name of Gail Brewer.
Yes. Former Manhattan Borough President. Yes. Love it.
Exactly. And now a city council member on the Upper West Side. She came, and I had the good fortune of having known her and having worked with her back in my political days, working with the former late Mayor David Dinkins. She said, we miss your float. What my constituents are saying, what happened to the Jazzmobile float, So I gave her the story, and then she said, well, I'm going to see what I can do to be helpful. I can point you in the right direction. I can tell you, who it is, what you need to do, but you need to apply for a capital grant from the city of New York. Beautiful. And so we did that. And so thanks to her generosity and seeing the proposal we submitted, seeing the value of it. And I will also underscore the fact that in our proposal, we actually use quotes from the Harlem community in particular, who talked about the importance of the Jazzmobile float and how important Jazzmobile was. So it was that kind of information. And then we also spoke to a former city council member, Bill Perkins.
Yes.
So together with Bill Perkins and Gail Brewer, we were awarded $185,000 to bring back the Jazzmobile float. So we're very excited about that. Yeah. So, but, during that time when we didn't have it, we've then found other ways to present the music by going into parks that already had a band shell, by collaborating with the Parks Department, who they have their own float. And so, example, anyone who's come to our Great Jazz on the Great Hill concerts that we do in collaboration with the Central Park Conservancy and the Parks Department, they provide us this wonderful stage, mobile stage, where we can bring it to a larger audiences there. So the plan is to keep doing what we're doing, but to add on more concerts by going back into the neighborhood, because the main focus of having the float is to go into the neighborhoods. So that's what we're looking forward to bringing back as soon as the float is ready.
Beautiful.
That's great.
So now, Craig, Robin had referenced that you got some serious intel because you are the curator. So please tell me about Afrofuturist. Tell us about that.
Whoa, I mean, I'm in the presence of futurists. So I'm talking to to hook everything up in the sense that when we're like, all right, just to come off of this float thing, like this float that as a young musician, I like so that float was like it was one of our saviors in the sense of as young musicians, in the sense of bringing the music right into the community. right into the community, like going over those St. Nicholas projects, having the float right up in there, going up in those Martin Luther King Towers, having the float right there, because that's how I became a musician, seeing the great people on the floats like that. And the futurism thing is, it all dovetails from that about us in our community doing what we're doing. I wanted to just say that float, one of my first Jazzmobile as a musician, my first Jazzmobile concert was on a float in Queens at they call it Brewer Park. I forgot the name. I think it's named after the big park.
Guy R. Brewer. Guy R. Brewer Park.
Brewer. Yeah. And there was a man named Hilly, and I the guy. I'm telling you some futurists. His name was Hilly and Jim Harrison. These were the people these were like griots who brought the music into our communities. They would talk it up all over. This guy named Hilly and Jim Harrison, who just lost recently. So I've known these people since I was a kid, and just growing up with this legacy, it's all the way up to Sun Ra, who was based in Harlem. And so when they talk, there's a man in the University of Pennsylvania. He coined the term Afrofuturism a couple of years ago, and now it's a code word. There's a lot of activity and what it is just people who have for a culture that has been historically denied. Everybody has interest in it now. So break it down historically. If you go back to Duke Ellington is a futurist. The Duke Ellington band played early in Harlem. The Duke Ellington band was not a popular band uptown. They were not, Jimmy Lunceford's bands were popular. Basie's band was more popular for dancing reasons. So Ellington was seen. He just stayed his gun. So he's a futurist. People like Savage. What's her name? Augusta Savage. People like Langston Hughes. These people who just like were doing their work, and though it just wasn't fitting into anybody's kind of format, they would keep doing their work. So now people are really investigating a lot of Jimi Hendrix, Miles Davis. I mean, the people, the crew. What was that? The Vogue crew. Anybody that's pushing the edge is considered a futurist. And I happened to spend like 4 years of my life working with Sun Ra. Sun Ra was born in 1914, so Sun Ra was older than Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, and all of them. But he was seen in the music. He was seen as a modernist, but he's not because his direct lineage comes out of Fletcher Henderson. And so if you want to go back to future, and I'm talking to young people. There was a man named Henry Pace. He had Black Swan Records. Henry Pace in the 20s. Henry Pace and William Grant Still and Fletcher Henderson. They said they were futurists and dealing with African thought, African continuum in that time. And so now it's become vogue. All black is popular now for some reason. For some reason, I wonder why. And so people have caught on to this futurism, Afrofuturism thing, and it's a good thing in that it's going to bring some attention to a lot of people didn't know anything about. But it's a greater thing for us to just know how beautiful and to reaffirm what we do. And Harlem Stage, one of the great iconic organizations in Harlem, Jazzmobile. I think they got together with Bryant Park, and we had an incredible celebration this summer, and it was led. I was part of it because I have an ensemble called the Nation of Imagination, and we played 3 or 4 concerts, and we filmed it, and we brought it to we filmed it. We're going to probably. We might have a big announcement in a couple of months. We'll see something. Like if you go back and going back there, we performed in Marcus Garvey Park. So to center, it's about who we are as a people and how we are always in the past, in the present, and the future at the same time. So I really, that's how I see us as a people. We're in the past, present, and the future all simultaneously. Now people are writing. I mean, they're writing their theses on people like Sun Ra. They're writing their theses on people like Bayard Rustin. They're writing their theses on these great and these great people who have always pushed the edge. And Harlem is at the center of that. I mean, you know, Harlem, I mean, it's arguable, you know, you're going to get the Chicago crew who's going to complain, and New Orleans is going to be complaining. But at one time, Harlem was seen as the center of African thought in this hemisphere.
The Renaissance.
Still is.
And you know what I've been thinking about? I'm thinking about collaborations. So definitely, you know, Robin, you need to tell me about some of the collaborations, certainly that Jazzmobile has been able to really forge during your period here.
Yeah. So building on the subject of Afrofuturism and the programming that's happening, Carnegie Hall for the past few years has done an annual citywide music festival, and this year the theme is Afrofuturism. And they invited Jazzmobile to be a part of that. So immediately, again, as Craig mentioned, we had collaborated with them with the Harlem Stage, which took the lead on that project. We were happy to be a part of that, but I knew right away that I needed to call our dear friend Craig, who, as you know, has been performing with Jazzmobile literally for decades. And so I reached out to him. And so we have been talking about trying to find a way to focus more on the music of Craig Harris, as well as the music of Sun Ra. So I went to him and I said, listen, you got some time this spring? Because he said, absolutely. So what we did was during that festival, and our programming happened on the end of the month. So we reached out to Greg Schenk at the City College Center for the Arts. It's at City College. We reached out to Steve Wilson, who heads up the Jazz Studies Department at City College of New York. And we all came together and we came up with a way that we could present this. Fortunately for us, with our curator, Craig Harris, he has some wonderful ideas. And then we just said, okay, fine, how can we build that and how can we make it fit into what the programming there at City College? So what we ended up with was a masterclass session, led, of course, by Craig Harris. Again, talking about Afrofuturism, the music of Sun Ra, and the music of Craig Harris. We also had a panel discussion where Craig put together, obviously he was there. And Craig, I can let you talk a little bit more about a little bit of background about who the panelists were, because I think, you know, it's important to note that as well. And then we also had an open rehearsal for all of the students at City College who are studying music and jazz, so they can come and actually experience the process of putting together the concert. And the concert was on the 30th of March. So it was a wonderful collaboration, not only of the institutions, but a collaboration in terms of the music that we were presenting with the different artists and performers. I mean, during the concert, we had what you would normally expect to see in a wonderful concert by Craig Harris, but he also brought in string instruments for this particular show, which he has done in other shows. But for the Jazzmobile audience, this was the first time we presented him in that context. And it was something that we are looking to further grow and develop. And speaking of collaborations, we're continuing to grow our collaborations that we're doing with City College and Steve Wilson at the Jazz Studies Department. We're finding more ways that we can not only enhance what we do, but also enhance what they're doing there at the college. And everyone knows the great work that Steve Wilson has been doing in the Jazz Studies Department. And it's all, and again, Jazzmobile, I always like to say, you know, Mobile is our last name. So we don't only do performance spaces, but through the great support of other organizations like City College, like Harlem Stage, like the Schomburg, we have been able to find places to present programming. Sticking with collaborations, we started a collaboration with the Interchurch Center. It started officially in September, and then we've been doing it all the way through, and it'll end on June 15th, where every third Wednesday we're presenting another jazz great, and it's giving us an opportunity to have had programming literally year-round for the first time. We're performance programming. The education programming, of course, has always been there, but the performance programming, so this was something that we're very excited and happy about. And we're looking to see how we can continue to grow and expand. And as we can talk about this another time, but Jazzmobile is going to be moving into new performance spaces and also into new headquarters a few years from now. So there'll be a lot more you'll be hearing about what Jazzmobile is going to be doing as we try to do more in our community.
And Robin, on that note, in terms of a new space, So literally, with the National Urban League project, you guys will
Yes.
have performance space in that space, huh?
No, I wish that were the case, but let me say it differently. I hope that we can find a place that we can within that center we can. But right now, the plan is that we have office space. And that's going to be a wonderful thing for us to have our own permanent office space. Currently, we are, to the generosity of in the Harlem State Office Building. That's where our current offices are. But we're looking to have much more space so we can continue to grow our capacity by being able to bring on more staff to expand what it is that we're doing. And that will be in the National Urban League. But as you also know, there's this wonderful space called the Victoria, which is soon come, as they say. And the Jazzmobile, originally we were going to be in residence there with office and performance. But when we were offered another opportunity to go into the National Urban League where we could have additional square footage for our office space. So it made sense for us to do that. And again, to the generosity of Inez Dickens and former state Senator Brian Benjamin, we are going to be able to be in that space. And again, I'm sure that's another show you'll be having to talk about that. But when we decided that we would leave the Victoria for the office space, we said we would maintain our residency for performance. So we'll be one of the art and cultures that'll be in residence there, but just for performance, sort of borrowing from what I said to people when we were offered this space at the Urban League. I said, we're going to borrow from the model of Jazz at Lincoln Center. Jazz at Lincoln Center's office space is about 2 blocks away from their performance space. So that's the model we're dealing with.
Gotcha. And Craig, certainly, what Robert referenced in terms of some of the artists that you're curating for the Afrofuturists, tell me about some of them.
Well, the event that took place at the Aaron Davis Hall the other night, and working in collaboration with Jazzmobile and Jazzmobile and Aaron Davis Hall. They have a new name. What's their name, Robin? Community CC something?
But the City College Center for the Arts.
Yeah, City College for the Center for the Arts, who used to be Aaron Davis Hall. We've had a long relationship, and the most important part of the thing for that whole experience was to interrelate with young people, because I really, because we talk about Afrofuturism, we talk about the future. It's how do we pass this on to the next crew, the next generation, and that's the beauty of being in there, doing those workshops, like doing that master class and having that concert and having those young people come and witness what we were doing. That's the most pivotal thing that we do right now. Even as Jazzmobile, like presenting this music to the next crew is very important, because I'm a firm believer. If you see it, you can believe it. You can be it. Really.
Yes.
And so I'm about like exposure to the young folks. Is really essential. Like for them to see us when they saw us rehearse, how we went about rehearsing, and to notice the methodology. And it goes back to like my commitment as you know me, Curtis. You're a neighbor. It's like my whole thing is like, how do it's about exposure. We have to expose our youth to this music and to our culture. We do it every Friday. We have an organization called Harlem Jazz Box. We have concerts every Friday night, and that comes from the inspiration of Jazzmobile and the inspiration of the people at this place called the East 10 Claver place, G2AUC, where you have to have the music in the community and really present it so people can see it, because they can see it, they can be it, and that was the essence of that whole experience of this Afrofuturism, because you have to give it to the future.
And
absolutely.
If I could,
go ahead.
So if I could add to that, building on the whole idea of education and education of jazz music, it was very important to Billy Taylor. That was why in 1957, I believe, is when he had a TV show called The Subject is Jazz. And the subject was jazz basically became our lecture dems that started in the 60s. And the idea of the lecture dems was not for the music students that were learning how to play the instrument, but it was so that anyone growing up could learn the value and the importance of the music. And the other part of that, of course, is when you have music in the public schools, you also see that there is a direct connection between verbal skills and math skills through music. So that was something that Billy was very much aware of, and is why one of the reasons why education was important. And then, of course, the added value was that you're creating new audiences. So if you're learning this music when you're in middle school, elementary school, and you're hearing it throughout your school education, that's something that, as you think about the kind of music that you enjoy and appreciate, in addition to the popular music of the time, in addition to European classical music, there's classical American music, jazz, that's a part of that, as well as gospel and all other kinds of music that's being played today. So the education of it was so very important to Billy. And then out of that also came the Saturday Jazz workshops came second, because Billy knew that when he and Jimmy were growing up, they could sit in at a Mittens Playhouse and they could sit there in the audience and hope that somebody would call them up on the stage and say, hey, man, why don't you come in and see what you can do? So because back then there were no places to study jazz music, either as an art form or as a skill set to learn how to play the music in the public school systems, or at the college or university level for that matter. And the only way you could learn was either to hear it live. You had to obviously go into the clubs, or of course, building upon what Craig said he did to learn how to play the pop music in that band that he was in. It was the same thing, right? The jazz artists, they play the albums and then try to imitate it and then try to create their own sound as a result of that exposure. But Jazzmobile was the first one to come along and say, hey, let's create this program. And so Saturday Jazz Workshop, which has grown and morphed over the years and has been adapting to the needs of the community. But so between the education program through art form, jazz as an art form, and then learning how to play the music. But even within that context, we're teaching theory, improvisation, we're teaching harmony, so in addition to learning how to play the instrument itself, it's all of that goes into it.
Nice. And on that particular note, Robin, certainly we talk about the whole teaching experience.
Yeah.
During, of course, COVID, the lockdown, how have you had to pivot?
Right. So in terms of pivoting on the education front, there's the current Saturday Jazz Workshop program. We've adopted a Title I school called the Celia Cruz Bronx High School of Music. And so and the good thing is I like to just talk about before I jump into the pivot process. What we found is that during the time we've been with the school now for maybe at that point for about 4 years, and every year they would apply to audition for the essentially Ellington program at Jazz at Lincoln Center. And the years after 3 years actually of working with us, they became a finalist in that process. And
Congrats.
They were the only Northeast high school that made it into the finalists. And the music director said the only big difference in all of it was she attributed to the major contribution that was made by the Jazzmobile clinicians coming in there, in addition to, which you can certainly not overlook, the basic skills of the students that were in the program, right? Because that's definitely crucial to it. So looking at that particular initiative for us has been very strong, and we're looking at seeing ways that we can expand the whole Saturday Jazz Workshop, so that we can go, because once upon a time we had other students involved. We had the young professionals that we like to say, had a day job and were gigging on the weekends. So that's one of the conversations that we're having with City College to see if there might be somewhere we can explore, finding a way to also bring that program back into our repertoire of education programming.
Excellent. And NightWatchman, remember when we had Dakota and C. Kelly Wright, which they actually talked about something that we didn't know about the discovery of some clubs that feature jazz in these particular venues in Uptown. Craig, in your travels, have you discovered any new clubs doing jazz in Harlem?
You know, this man, that's that's a funny one, Curtis, because I want to dovetail off of Robin about this education thing and bring it into
Okay,
what you said.
go for it.
First of all, and this is something that's really with me. You know, Booker T. Washington had this saying, "Cast your buckets where you stand." Okay, in the sense of, you know, we're building this community, but you can't. One of the most important things when working with those young folks and watching them in the rehearsals and then watching them watch us is you have to kind of embrace the community that the music comes from. The music isn't by itself, you know, because right now there are more quote jazz programs in academia than it's a whole industry. Every major university has a jazz program.
Yep.
Wow.
But what its essence is, they don't have a Harlem, or they don't have a South Side of Chicago, or they don't have a Central Avenue, or they don't have a Hill in Pittsburgh. And that's the essence of Jazzmobile, and the work that we do is that in the community where like I said, if you go to 125th Street and Lenox Avenue, you walk down the subway, every great writer, every great musician, every great person from this African continuum has walked down those stairs. You walk them. So the whole thing about our culture is it's for everybody. Anybody can come and learn the music, but you have to study. You got to know something about Sylvia's. You got to know something about. You got to know something about the church. You got to know something about the people where this music comes from. And and then like Dakota, like they have these Dakota. I call us the late night crew. I'm in the bed by 12. But they continue in that legacy, you know, where you could go to an apartment like Mary Lou on Hamilton Terrace. Mary Lou Williams, musicians would go to our house 2:00 in the morning.
Wow.
And play. And so they want to recreate that place where the music, even like going back to Kansas City, music was 24/7. You go, you finish your set at 3:00. You go somewhere and jam till 6:00. Then you eat breakfast. Then you sleep about 4:00, and then you wake up around 2-3 o'clock. You meet in somebody else's house. But it has to come from the community. We have to really embrace this community, and so that's how it happens, Curtis. And in the sense of education, also when she talked about the first Northeast band, I'm gonna be very, very candid about it. Where are the young Craig Harrises? Where are the young Bill Saxons? Where are the young people in this music? And they're not. When you go to these programs, you don't see them. And that concerns me that I see very few young African Americans on these programs. So that's why I commit and cast my buckets where I stand. We have to do it here in our community, and that's the beauty of working that relationship with Steve Wilson, who's in academia, who has a tenured position. I know I shouldn't say tenure. I don't know, but I know he's a professor at City, because now we have a cross pollination, like bring them like they can bring them down to the Jazzmobile concerts into the community. They can bring them, to the Harlem Jazz our concerts. It's about just coming. It's getting that mix, Curtis. So that's how I see it happening. And the soapbox. It may not be so-called jazz, but that's the tradition. They were doing 122nd and Lenox, the young folk in the summer.
Yep.
It would be packed out there. That's the same feeling that Ellington and Charlie Parker had in our community. It's that same feeling of that same. You were there, Curtis. You know that. What they did, 22nd, and it's that continuum.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I can, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask Craig, because we talked a little bit about what we all had to do during the shutdown. And before this show, Craig and I were talking about the fact that he's actually getting on the plane for the first time in 3 years. But he also talked a little bit about what he was doing during the break, if you will. So, Craig, tell us a little bit about what you were doing when things shut down.
March 7th, 2020. I was on stage at the museum, the Natural History. at the Temple, up there at the Temple Indoor with Nona Hendrix, the great artist. Nona Hendrix.
Oh yes.
LaBelle, we did a concert, and it's part of Back to Robbins. It was part of the Afrofuturism thing. It was called Sunrise. And we had a great concert down there. I came out there, and the next day I went to Ornette Coleman's house. Even though he's gone, his son celebrates his birthday on his birthday, March 10th.
Nice.
Party at Loft, and then I came home, and the world changed, and we were just getting ready to do a film called Judas and the Black Messiah, which was was about Fred Hampton, the former Black Panther.
Yep.
So I was privileged enough to score the film, and we started scoring the film, and we were in my house with 9 musicians, and we were getting ready to go through the script and everything. But they said, we can't be up in here like this. COVID's on, so we had to do everything virtual. So everybody had to raise their virtual game and their technology game. So we scored throughout the pandemic. We scored the film. I was here. My co-composer Mark Isham was in California. My music editor Marvin Morris was in Denver, and we just scored a whole film virtually. Everybody had to get up on their live. Everybody had to get up on their technology, and we just stayed in here and I did the work, and that's when this whole like SteamYard, Facebook, all of it. We got into the virtual world of technology. So the futurists are we were in the future. We were in the future, and that was for a year almost. And then we finally went to August. In August, we went to Manhattan Center. We rented Manhattan Center. This is Warner Brothers film, so it's a big budget film. And we went in and we had a 60-piece orchestra in Manhattan Center, and we recorded the track. And the film did very well. We just were nominated for the NAACP Image Award. We didn't win the Harder They Come one, but it was a very productive time with technology for me during the pandemic.
Yeah, and you had asked me earlier about you had asked me earlier about how Jazzmobile was able to pivot, talking about the education, but we also pivoted for Summerfest. But with the education part, we were able to normally we give private and semi-private lessons when we're in person in the school. So we switched to the Zoom platform. We had private lessons for every student, and they were offered a 1-hour class each week. And because, we have a certain kind of sensitivity to things that happen in the Zoom world, if you will, we invited the parents, the caregivers, to sit in on the class with their child every time that one of our clinicians came into their home, even though it was virtually. And we found that was added value also, because we found that through the music director, that the parents themselves got another level of appreciation for jazz education, what was being afforded to their children for free. Because again, Jazzmobile's programs are still free, the education programs, as well as our performance programs. And then for Summerfest for 2020, at that point, 99% of our concerts were in New York City parks. City Parks Department, rightfully, was not giving out any permits for events. So everyone, our donors are reaching out to us, our audience are reaching out to us, say, so what's going to happen with Summerfest this year? You can't come into the parks. So we very quickly sent out a message saying that Jazzmobile Summerfest will not be canceled. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's not going to be canceled. So what we did, then we very quickly, we went to YouTube, we set up a JZM TV station, and then that worked out very well for us, because this was like in March when we did that. So by June, the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment had announced that they were once again offering permits for production companies to record film and television.
Okay.
I called them up and said, hi, my name is Jazzmobile. We have a TV station called JCM TV. Do we qualify to get a permit? He paused for a minute and he said, actually, yes, you do qualify. So, so we did that. And then he said, however, if you want to record in the parks, you have to get permission from the Parks Department. Went to the Parks Department. They said, okay, but you can't have an audience and you can't have amplified sound.
Gotcha.
But you have to go to the park manager of each park you want to go into and get their permission. So we were able to get all the necessary permissions and permits. So we did Great Jazz on the Great Hill in Central Park with a big band, with Allison Williams, with Jeremy Pelt, and there was no amplified sound. Thanks to technology and the wonders of Bluetooth, we were able to do everything through the sound system. And as people walked by, which was fine, but nobody was really gathering to in any unsafe way. But they could hear a trumpet, they could hear a clarinet, they couldn't hear anything else. They couldn't hear a vocalist singing. But at the end, the net result was absolutely phenomenal. And we ended up having maybe like 4,000 people, and 3,000 people actually viewed the Great Jazz on the Great Hill concert. But we did that in Marcus Garvey Park with Craig Harris and 3 other artists. We did it at Grant's Tomb. So we took a day and recorded, pardon me, we recorded four groups at each day that we recorded in one of the parks. And we were able to present Summerfest 2020 virtually. And it was very well received.
Wow. So definitely, I got to say that since, I guess, lockdown and the pivot, and COVID obviously is still here, but you guys learning to live with it is what's happening now. So what do you guys anticipate this summer in terms of anything special I should look out for?
Well, in the sense from they're going to be more outdoor concerts. They're going to be more. I took for me, and it goes back to the great brass tradition. We did a concert called Breathe at Brooklyn Botanical Garden outdoors, and it's about Breathe. Breathe is in response to all of the physical violence against African American men. We did it in 2016, but we did it at Brooklyn Botanical Garden with like 20 brass instruments and percussion. So that means no electricity was needed. With brass and percussion instruments will play. You can play them anywhere. You don't need amplifiers. You don't need no electricity. You can just cover the musicians up. So we did Breathe out there with like 20 musicians. 2 tubas, French horns, and so we're going to be doing Breathe throughout New York area this summer. We're going to do Breathe, and we're going to do it. I'm going to be curating the Jazz in the Valley Festival this year up that they're having in Poughkeepsie.
Yeah.
And it's about, as Robin said, like there was a day that you had singers that didn't need no microphones. So we're going that route where we're going to be doing things without acoustic. Acoustic and that can be heard, and that's the continuum, because that's where we come from, because you can't do it without electricity, and all the technology is beautiful, but when it goes out, what you going to do? And so there's like the brass bands in New Orleans, there's no electricity there, and we can still pop, and we're going to be doing a lot of outdoor things, and hopefully people get vaccinated, and people will wear their mask, and we'll modulate, like musicians. We improvise and find a safe space. We'll find a safe space.
Absolutely, wow. Robin, what do you see?
Yeah, so for Jazzmobile in 2021, we went back to live and in person. So this past summer, but again, because of the COVID protocols, we were restricted in terms of capacity. But this year, 2022, we're coming back full capacity, 100%. And we are definitely going to follow all the protocols. But we always encourage, even as protocols are being released a little bit and not going to be as severe as they were, we're still going to encourage people to wear their masks. Even though we're outdoors, and even like last summer, the same thing. We encourage everybody to please keep your mask on throughout. The musicians also, obviously, were wearing their mask until they were performing. Although I will say there was one saxophone player who took his mask and put a slit through it, and he put his mouthpiece through that because he said he wasn't taking any chances. So I talk about creativity, right?
Adapt and improvise. Yeah.
Improvise. There you go. But 2022 is going to be a great year. We're doing more collaborations than we've done in the past, and it's great because we get the phone calls from different groups who are inviting us to join and be a part of what it is they're doing. We've been working with Summer Stage for a number of years, where every Friday, as your audience will know, we're Marcus Garvey Park. And then one year, the Charlie Parker Festival, which I'm happy to say Jazzmobile actually produced the very first one many years ago.
Congrats.
They were doing it down in Tompkins Square Park on Sundays. And then when we were still involved in it with being one of the co-producers with the wonderful late great Johnny Gary. Johnny said to them, listen, you need to do this in Harlem. We know that, Bird lived right across the street from the park downtown, but Harlem was his home. So they started doing it on Saturdays. And then a few years later, when I had joined, they said, we'd like to also do it on Fridays. So we co-present on Fridays. And we started one way, but it's continuing to grow, and we're going to be doing more with them. In addition, we're going to be doing up to 3 additional concerts in partnership with the Summer Stage, which does phenomenal work in parks throughout the entire city, and obviously not just jazz rather. And one of the programs we're going to be doing with them is doing what we are calling, Jazzmobile refers to as vernacular jazz dance. So that's coming up. And of course, we'll be back at Grant's Tomb. We'll certainly be back in Central Park on August 13th with Great Jazz on the Great Hill with 3 hours of nonstop wonderful music. That will also include a dance floor for the swing dancers that like to come and enjoy the performances. Yeah, and then we'll be going back to Snug Harbor. We'll be going back to Co-op City. So we are in all 5 boroughs once again.
Beautiful.
Yes. And we're also going to be in the block once again. There's a great block party that we do every year in Brooklyn. So we've got a lot of great things happening. And of course, Craig Harris will be on the bill.
Wow. And Robin, of course, if folks want to know about this stuff, how can they learn about your calendar?
Right. So we'll be officially announcing our Summerfest calendar in April during National Jazz Appreciation Month. But you can go to our website, www.jazzmobile.org, and it'll be there for sure. And then we have a hotline once the season starts in July. The 212-866-3616 is the hotline. And in the unlikely event, and I put in quotes a big happy laughing face, that there's inclement weather, yes, we've been making various accommodations to adjust that. But I want to just very quickly say, as I talk about collaborations, the International Center for the Arts, I'm sorry, the Interfaith Center for the Arts. Interfaith Center for the Arts. Slow down, Robin. It's the Interchurch Center. Is that right?
Is that at 475 Riverside?
Yes, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yep. No worries.
I gotta apologize. I hope you can edit this for me. But it's the Interfaith Center.
Interchurch.
Right. Anyway, and so we've been there every 3rd Wednesday. We've been presenting a program. And so they have also offered it to us in the unlikely event of inclement weather that we can definitely come there, and we can bring our Wednesday concerts anyway, can go into their space. And we're very, very grateful to them, because without the Interchurch Center, we would not have been able to do what we've done. So feel free to edit my stumbling with your name.
No. This is what happens when you have to pivot, you have to adapt, and that's what we're doing right here. This is happening in real time, ladies and gentlemen. So, NightWatchman, take us home, baby.
Well, let's give Craig the last word.
Go ahead, Craig, baby. Yep.
Just as a Harlemite, just as a musician, just as a person who's been blessed to share the gift of this great culture. I just want everybody to just take care of themselves, do some research, respect all these communities where this gentrification is going on. Respect the culture of these communities, embrace it. Come in and we all work together to have a beautiful, peaceful world. And that's all I can really say. I'm just really excited about the future in our community, and just everybody's in nothing but peace and love. Love everybody.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
And as a matter of fact, if you're a lucky jazz aficionado, maybe Craig will break in his new trombone. Just saying.
and maybe he'll do it during Harlem Week.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Give me this. That's it. It's so good to
Exactly.
just be with y'all. You know, and I just commend y'all for keeping, you know, during the lockdown, radio was important to us, y'all. So we would NightWatchman and DJ LeRoy. It was you saved some people's life. Last night, what was it? I listened to a DJ Saved My Life.
Right.
Ah!
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, baby. Good one.
There you go.
So, NightWatchman, what are you saying now?
You've been listening to Soul Lounge Primetime on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Also live on YouTube and Facebook. We're always on Monday nights, 7 p.m. on the radio, live streaming at 8 p.m. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.